Okay, Beatrix, do you feel okay?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, I love you so much. You're such a trooper. We haven't even started, and this has been the best podcast ever. This is the highlight. Someone highlight this whole section. This is beautiful. Okay. Hi everybody, welcome to today's episode of Coven Conversations. I am Poop with Jax, and today I am joined by our co-caster, BangBangBeatrix. How are you, Beatrix?
Hi guys, I'm doing great. How are you?
We are doing fantastic. We had a little bit of tech issues, but we are now going to discuss something that I think all of us are really looking forward to. We are going to be talking about mythology today, but in a large scale sense. So I'm really excited for this. I just want to say before we get going, trigger warning for anyone who might be a little bit more sensitive to some of the topics we will be discussing. Mythology does have dark under and overtones, and there are going to be parts of the stories that might be upsetting to some viewers, so viewer discretion is advised. I do hope you enjoy the podcast, and before any of the triggering things, content that we talk about, we will say trigger warning beforehand, but it is just a warning now that if this is not your cup of tea, it is not a problem at all. But if you are interested, I hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. So, Beatrix.
Yeah.
So, we had a Greek mythology podcast with Drifter Dreams, and you were so passionate about it. You asked so many questions, gave so much insight. And when we decided to do a podcast, you were like, let me do mythology on a more macro sense. And I want to know why you're so passionate about it. Like, what was the thing that got you started into mythology?
Such a good question. Realistically, I'm not quite sure. Mm-hmm. I feel like when I was young, 4 or 5 years old, I was very much interested in and basically wanted to be Xena, warrior princess.
Oh, love Xena.
Who lives in a very mythological world, and that's her time period. So, as a very young child, that was me. Mm-hmm. And recently, when I remembered I was a witch, I have gotten back into it, connecting specifically with several female goddesses, specifically Greek. But my love for Greek mythology in general has led me to explore other mythologies and then notice how incredibly similar they are. And so that's going to be the main
kind of, but you said something interesting. You said when I remembered I was a witch. Was there a time period where you weren't practicing anymore?
I say that in a more multi-life kind of way. As in, I didn't wake up one day and decide, oh, I'm going to be a witch today. I woke up and remembered that I actually was a witch.
Oh, I love that. First of all, also, Beatrix, your name is also Haley. Do you want me to call you Beatrix or Haley? Side note. Okay.
Either is perfect, but Beatrix is
we got two Haleys over here, guys. We got 2 Haleys going on. So a lot of power in this place right now. But that is actually one of the coolest sentiments I've ever heard from a fellow witch, saying I remembered basically I always was, and it was always within me. And do you feel like it was an awakening, like that feeling of, oh, that, or was it just like one day you were like, I remember I used to do this kind of feeling?
No, an awakening is a perfect way to describe it.
Okay.
It was through a couple friends plus 10,000 books. Just the ability to connect with the earth, as well as the elements.
I didn't ask Beatrix how she spells her name because I already know. But Beatrix, how do you spell Haley? It's not the way I spell it.
Correct. My Haley is Haley.
Yeah,
however,
not the same.
Most of high school, I wrote it Haylee.
Oh.
So, just to confuse people.
Well, honestly, I appreciate that. All spellings of Haley's matter, but I must say the two most elite are the Haley and Hayley, and I will stand by that forever.
Same here, me and you both. Mm-hmm.
Hell yes. So I love that. I love that you felt like it was an awakening and your soul reconnected with its soul's purpose, which I think is amazing and incredible. And I love that that also took you to the world of mythology. So do you worship a specific deity?
I commune with, maybe worship is too strong of a word, but if you were putting a teeny tiny religious box, yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But Artemis, the Greek goddess of the wild, of the moon, of the hunt, she is the one that I connect with most strongly.
Okay.
There are several others, but she is my patron goddess.
So Artemis, you said, was for the hunt. What resonated with you for her?
She is a female who has no interest in having anything to do with men. She said when she was 5 years old, she went to her father and asked, can I have these things? And the first thing she said is, I never want to have to depend on a man.
Oh, nice.
As a 5-year-old girl,
Yes, that's very enlightened, yes.
And so that spoke to me on a very deep level.
I love that.
She's the goddess of mountains, which are just where my soul is the happiest.
So are you a forest or like a beach person?
Both. I would love to have both.
Okay. we have a dynamic witch over here, because I always feel like a lot of like green. Do you identify as a green witch?
Not specifically.
Okay. Are you more of like an eclectic?
I am.
Okay. Because I usually feel like anyone who identifies with a green witch kind of goes forest. And then obviously, Snash is a sea witch. I mean, we have so many different witches in the poop coven, but it really I always like to ask that question, are you a forest or are you a beach? But you are both, which I love and I appreciate.
Absolutely both.
The duality of that is beautiful, and I appreciate that very, very, very much. And so also you have a Christian faith, right? That was sort of how you were raised.
Yeah, absolutely. Both of my parents are ordained ministers in the Christian tradition.
Okay.
But luckily enough, I actually have a father who has a doctorate in theology.
Oh, wow.
My life, they both told me to look at things, ask questions, read for yourself, make up your own mind.
I love that.
And for that, I am forever grateful.
I think that's actually amazing, because it's an unfortunate, I don't know if you want to say side effect or however you want to phrase it, but it's an unfortunate thing that many religions want you to have tunnel vision for that specific religion and to not teach yourself or learn about the varieties of things out there, whether it is something like, paganism, Wiccan, or even just spirituality. So I'm really glad that, your parents allowed you to find other things that resonated with you, which is really beautiful. So what age were you when you felt like you were a witch, by the way? I'm just curious. Or when you were awakened to the feeling that you knew you were a witch?
So that happened when I was about, I would say 25 or 26.
Okay.
I had recently quit using opiates.
Okay.
I am a recovering opiate addict.
Okay.
Recovering, because you'll always be.
Yes. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm very, very proud of you.
Thank you.
That is an incredible achievement to overcome, and you should feel incredibly proud of yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, I hug you. I would hug you. I did not know that, and I feel really honored that you shared that with us. But it's pretty. That is an enormous accomplishment. So I'm very proud of you.
Thank you again. But yeah, so when I was on my way out of that, it was in that time when I was relearning kind of who I am, where I fit in the world, that kind of thing.
Right. That, and I also think that's just in a very awakening time in general, because you're
in
sort
your
of
life.
in
Yeah.
your life. Yeah, you're transitioning from being like a young adult to what society perceives as like an adult, and you're
As
sort
an
of finding your
actual- yeah.
footing. Exactly. I think that makes a lot of sense and is really, really important. I also think it's kind of important because a lot of people, there's a little bit of gatekeeping within the, you know, the witchcraft witches community. I don't want to say just Wiccan, because not everyone identifies as a Wiccan, but
Sure.
where you feel like you have to start when you're 4. That is not necessarily true. You can start at any age. It is not restrictive at all. You can start your journey at any point. So I think that's really important to say. And I wanna ask about now on the more mythological sense. What were some of the first things that we would need to know, like going forward through this?
There are 2 big things that specifically when I look at mythology, knowing that these are and may still be practicing religion.
Okay.
These are the religions that if you were in Greece in this time period, this was the religion that you would have been. Hellenistic is what it's called. And in that, I want to be incredibly careful where I step, because it is religion, and religion in itself brings up potential issues. So I just want to make everyone understand that I'm looking at these as they are stories and not real life situations. If you want to look at them differently, no problem.
And I think that's an important thing to denote, that it's true. Some people do still look at interpret these as religious stories, and still, you know, it seems like, do you not like the word worship? Is that not the right word? Should I not be using that when you talk about mythology?
I definitely think it's a okay word to use.
Okay.
Because yeah, I mean, if you were a human at the time, you would be worshiping any of the gods and gods. So worship is a completely okay word.
Okay.
Just not the one that came to my head immediately.
Yeah, because I never know, because I wasn't raised in a religious family, and from my perspective, I look at these as more of like stories, but you're absolutely right. There were times where these stories were the fundamental lifeblood of people of this time. So I love that you made note of that. That's very important.
And mainly they're there to explain why things are the way they are.
Right.
But one of the big things you need to know is that every story that has ever been told has ever been told 10 times over. It's been told over and over and over. It has just been repackaged for the time and age, and even potentially what the ruling class wanted to get done.
Right.
Not going to go in that direction, but just throwing it out there.
But I think what you're trying to say is that these are like stories that people shared throughout many, many generations within each other, within their family,
Absolutely.
And they've been passed down and that kind of thing.
Correct. Which then leads to the second idea, that they are oral traditions, the majority of them, especially what we know today. We have a little bit of writing, but at that time, people didn't have a pen and paper to write things down the way we do.
Right.
Writing was a big, big deal. So you passed things down orally. You heard your grandmother tell the story of how we came to be here, and why the moon rises, and why the moon waxes and wanes, or why the day is the amount of time it is, or things like that.
Well, also, we could just make a notation, because some people, when when you look at it from where we're standing now, some of the stories that we've heard, we're like, how could people back then think those things? But we have so many scientific advancements that explain away the miracles that people used to not understand and think were, this is a miracle, this is a god giving us this, or a goddess bringing us this. And those things were very as real to them as science is now real to us. So I think the stories of how, philosophers, and they would look up to the sky and they would see the heavens and they would see things and how they would make sense of it. It's important to remember that those were very real to them back then, and now the stories that we hear sound fantastical, but if we didn't have the sciences that we have now, we would not really know any different. Those things were very real to them, and they are beautiful and terrifying. Can you imagine if you just didn't understand like what the hell was happening?
Why the sun rose? Oh my god,
what's happening?
Favorite
or even
books of all time.
Like a natural disaster. Like that's terrifying. Like they would have no idea.
Totally. Absolutely. Even the thunder and the lightning, which is why you see Zeus specifically, but you see the same character in Norse mythology. You see the same character, Thor, in Norse mythology. You see this character in Egyptian mythology. You see this character, this god of the skies, the ones who bring thunder and lightning. These characters overlap. But you said something about astrologers, and it made me think of one of my favorite books in the world, Circe by Madeline Miller. And there's a joke in it, and the daughter Circe is talking to her father, who is Helios, the god of the sun. And she says, "Father, are the astronomers going to be in trouble because you're running late today?" Because he was the one that decided the amount of time. And the astronomers would have said, "Oh, well, the day is supposed to be over today, but it's not." And so they would have gotten who knows what kind of punishment for the actual sun god deciding to be late.
I love that. That's such a cute story, and it's kind of it's very endearing actually, and it humanizes the whole fact that they're gods, and these stories that's really cute.
Well, and that's the thing. The gods are reflections of us as humans. They may be quote unquote all powerful, but that does not mean they do not have problems. That does not mean they do not feel sadness or upsetness.
And also, I think, in some ways, they're almost the extreme versions of us. They are even angrier and more temperamental and more jealous and more lustful. I mean, they're like human superheroes, and to the extent that they feel all their emotions more than humans do. Do you know what I mean?
Super. That definitely track.
Yeah, and I mean, even from just the little bit of information I learned from the previous podcast is like, they do a lot of terrible things. If anything, they do truly terrible things. Like to each other, to their siblings, to their children. I mean, they do a lot of really messed up stuff. Trigger warning, they do. Yeah, really. Yeah. So that's actually an interesting standpoint, that they're mirror images of what humans, almost to the most extreme spectrum of humanity.
Like you're exactly right. Superhero is the closest that you could get to like a coronation with a connection with what we are currently.
Right. And that's how I sort of perceive these stories, is like humans explaining things that make no sense, and also like how do you explain like the feeling that they're worshiping these gods and goddesses, but to an extent that like they're also not allowed to behave like them. That sort of duality is they're almost like we watch them and we're like, this is what not to do, because like this god does this thing, but also at the same time we're not allowed to do those things. So it's sort of an interesting.
It brings you back to the idea of an adult telling these stories to make sure that the child doesn't make a certain mistake.
Right. Like your oral traditions being passed down and using them as I love that. Yes, that's very true. That's very true. They're like tales to tell people of also like what not to do.
Right. Not only are they explaining where coconut trees come from. In the song You're Welcome from Moana. Or I mean, it's...
He was a demigod, right?
He was a demigod.
He was a demigod, right? Yeah. I actually love that song. Yeah. It's very
it's a great song.
Moana is just great.
Yeah, I just freaking cry through the whole thing. I can't even. Good. It's so good.
But it's actually interesting that even I know Moana came out a while ago, but to me it's very recent. Okay, it feels recent.
Totally, I agree. I totally agree.
You know, Moana has so many mythological, the whole story is based off of that. So that's actually, a lot of us, I said this again, the most amount of information I ever learned about mythology was reading the Odyssey in high school, and that was my full extent. So it's actually,
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Someone should apologize. Oh my God. If you have not read that book, my goodness, don't.
Yeah, don't.
don't.
But there are better mythological books to read, I promise.
So many. And they're not 3,000 pages. So, yeah.
True. And they're not in verse, verse.
Please don't remind me. Please don't. Most painful book that a teacher can make you read. But that's also why I think for me, I stayed away from mythology, because that was my first and last delving into this topic until we started doing the podcast. And I was like, okay. So I know that you like Greek and Norse mythology. What is the biggest difference or a commonality between the two?
Differences are cultural, sure. They're in different areas of Europe, I guess.
Do you think that factors into the way the gods are portrayed? Because in Greece, they had gods and goddesses that were sunbathing and
I highly think they do.
So the geography plays a role.
Yeah. If in just the idea that of what the gods and goddesses look like. I mean, just the idea of I'm trying to of a giantess who was welcomed into the Aesir's home because one of the others killed her father. I mean, the Greeks wouldn't have done that.
Right. And I also think
there are
they're mirror images, right, of where they look, what they look like. So if you live in Greece, you're gonna probably, your gods and goddesses are gonna look like they're from Greece. But if you live in Iceland or
Mediterranean,
that probably which is interesting. Yeah, and that's how these stories, and traditions are applied.
When you talk about similarities, on the other hand, that's where it just blows my mind and helps me remind myself, not only myself, but then to remind other people how similar we all are to the core of our beings.
Yeah.
So one of those main similarities is that, and most mythologies start from chaos. That before there was this time or history to record, there was chaos. Nothingness, and all of us start from fire and ice, chaos and order, light and dark. These opposites, the duality of life that makes everything move forward.
And those are both that sort of premise is in all both major mythologies that you've, holy smokes, you've seen. Okay.
Not only in Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Egyptian mythology. I mean, if you go into the Asian mythologies, even if you go as far back as Mesopotamia, what we know about the Mesopotamians, they started from chaos.
Right.
Which is a good place to start. I mean,
right. And I think that's also a reflection of humanity, is that a lot of it stems from chaos, which is which makes sense, which absolutely makes sense. Okay, so what would be the first sort of story that plays into that chaos?
So, if we start from chaos with the Greeks, because I know we talked a little bit about that with Drifter, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail way we have a really good basis for whatever other exploring anybody would like to do from this point. So, from the formless chaos sprang two creations. Erebus was darkness, Nyx was night. They coupled immediately, and the flashing offspring of their union, Humara, day, and Ether, light, were created. Some things you need to know. This is the first order, is what they're referred to as. And these gods and goddesses are the human personification of what they stand for.
Okay.
So Nyx is night. She actually is the darkness that spreads over the world when the sun goes down.
Spooky. Okay.
I really connect with Nyx. I have a dog named Nyx.
Oh, so. Do you really?
I do. I had planned to pull her in and show everyone at this point.
Oh my god! Oh, you'll have to post a picture in Discord. I love
post
that,
some pictures in Discord.
Oh yes, you must.
But at the same time, because everything just happened simultaneously before time was there to separate events, chaos brought forth two more entities.
Okay.
Gaia, the personification of Earth.
Love Gaia.
I always refer to her as Grandmama Earth.
Yes, that's how. Yes.
She's our overall grandmother.
She's Mother Earth, essentially. She's everything.
She is, right, absolutely. And then also Tartarus, which is this idea of the deepest depth and caves beneath Earth. We're going to hit on Tartarus in a minute.
Okay.
But after these four beings came from chaos, Gaia, on her own will, decided that she would create the sky and the sea.
Ooh.
The sky, Uranus. Some like to refer to him as Uranus, but I prefer Uranus.
How dare you? His name is Uranus, and you will say it like that.
So that is the Roman word for him.
Wait, how do you say it? Uranus?
So it's Ouranos.
Okay, so let me just tell you something, because I'm gonna tie this together. Everyone who's here right now, I love you to Uranus and back. So thank you so much. Okay, because the struggle is real. Okay, so your Uranus, I'm never gonna be able to say it, but Uranus, you say it so pretty. Okay, so what did he do?
So he ended up becoming the husband of Gaia. So this is a little kind of strange.
I remember him. Time out.
Yeah.
He is an absolute psychopath.
Yes,
right?
100%. Absolutely.
Okay.
He ends
I remember
up eating his children.
Yes, and there's that famous painting of
there is.
Him ripping the head off. Right. Trigger warning. We warned you guys there's gonna be trigger warning. There's going to be things like this. It's mythology. They did horrible things to each other. So as a warning, yes. Okay, so Gaia and my body will not say it other than Uranus.
I know.
Okay.
You're fine. You're totally good.
So Uranus and Gaia are basically the the grandparents of the universe, essentially.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
But back before that, we're talking about how Gaia gave virgin birth, quote unquote, right? Mm-hmm. And this idea is, again, we see this scattered throughout mythology. But we also even see it today in nature. Some animals, like aphids, well, maybe not virgin birth specifically, but the ability to produce offspring without a mate.
Okay. Yeah. That happens with a lot of amphibians and stuff.
Absolutely. Okay. My example were aphids. It's reasonably common to produce offspring by parthenogenesis.
Okay.
It always says, however, there will not be as much variation where between one set of genes.
Right.
The same is to say of the Greek gods. The interesting ones are all from the fruit of two parents, not just one. So
right.
Just keep that in mind as we go.
She's like, hold that thought for later. Okay.
I mean, we see it, the idea of virgin birth, we see in Christianity, we see it in Egyptian mythology multiple times. Isis,
the most famous is
Horus.
I would say probably the Virgin Mary is the one a lot of people associate with virgin births. Yeah, she's
Absolutely.
pretty famous. Okay.
Even Hera later on in Greek mythology, the wife of Zeus,
right? I remember
gave birth to a child with no help from her husband or any other man for that matter.
The men in, a lot of the things I've learned through the mythology is like the men don't do that many good things. There's some stuff that goes on.
There's a lot of patriarchy, nonsensicalness. I don't know exactly the right word for it,
right?
But like the amount that they do the amount that the females do is just nowhere near.
What are you trying to say, that there's a little bit of like a gender inequality?
I know, right? Could you imagine?
I never. Okay, so that's actually really interesting. That even, I mean, going back to when you have gods and literal goddesses, there were still things that were not fair.
Absolutely.
Well, but to tie this all together, they are a reflection of humanity, and that has been a long time trend of humans. So I guess it kind of makes sense in a really sad and unfortunate way.
It's absolutely true, and you can trace the social change in Egypt, where it went, well, I guess from Mesopotamia to Egypt, where it went from females being the matriarch of the society to males being in charge. And we see how great that's turned out for us. So,
Athena was born from Zeus's forehead. Is that true?
So say the tales.
So say the tales. How come I don't remember that? Wait, what? From his all right, well, that's interesting. So, okay. And it was all
Zeus fell in love with Metis. Metis was his teacher, his almost au pair, you could say. Okay. And she knew, and Zeus at that time knew also, that his first child was supposed to rise up and be stronger than its father. Cycle that we see, Kronos does it to Uranus, Zeus then does it to Kronos, and so the prophecy was given that Zeus's first child would grow to be mightier than his father. So Zeus realized that he was falling for Metis, and Metis realized she was falling for him and said, this isn't the right thing, I shouldn't be doing this. So she decided to, there are two versions of the story. The one that I'm telling is she decided to then enter and be his conscience. So she became Zeus's conscience. She gave away her freedom. But in doing that, she kept a lot of control over the world. She kept Zeus's heart. And she also produced the child Athena from inside Zeus. So the story goes, after she decided to become his conscience, he had headaches for days and days and days. And after one of the worst of the headaches, Athena burst from his forehead, completely armored. She has a fantastic headset and plume and a crazy
she just came out ready for war.
Yeah, absolutely, as the goddess of wisdom and war.
And basically, that actually, I guess that makes real. She's well suited for that. It seems kids are really headaches. Yeah, very good joke.
Truly.
Wow. Okay.
She ends up being his very favorite daughter too, mainly because he didn't feel like he owed anything to anyone because of her. As you will see later if you look anything into any of the stories of Zeus's children.
Yeah.
Most of them are not
he does not a fan of them.
Yeah.
That's a nice way
Some
to
of
put
them,
it.
a couple. A couple of them he likes.
A couple of them he lets live. Yeah.
But back to the story of Gaia and Uranus coming together, producing the second order, the Titans. 6 males, 6 females, all then interbred and produced most of what we know today. However,
trigger warning, when she says interbred, trigger warning, she means incest. So there's a lot of incest in mythology. Siblings
mated and produced
keeping in
offspring.
the family, hardcore. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Kronos, who was the strongest and the most angry. That's literally what the text says. The most angry
Okay.
of all of the Titans. Married his older sister Rhea, and together they became the parents of the Olympians. The Olympians are the ones that are the high gods, quote unquote, goddesses that we refer to. They are the main ones. Zeus, Hades, Poseidon, Demeter, Hera, Hestia. And like I was saying earlier, this same story where Kronos dismembers his father, removes his ability to produce offspring, e.i. his genitalia.
So there's some trigger warning, some mutilation happening.
Yeah. It's a long story, but basically Gaia lures Uranus home, and one thing leads to another. Right.
Wait. Gaia? Grandma?
Mm-hmm.
With her this would
with
be
her
her
husband.
Wait, with her husband?
And her son.
And
so her
her
husband is Uranus, and her son. Because she saw how Uranus was not taking care of the universe. All he wanted was to lie with her and then sleep all day, basically, is what the text
He's got
says.
the right vibes. It is
Right,
all symbolic.
however,
of
when
course,
you're the
it's
god
all
of the
symbolic.
universe,
Yeah, but yeah, you
gotta
gotta get to work,
that.
Uranus. Come on, man.
But so she got very upset, went to her son Kronos, god of time and angriness. He then very famously uses a scythe to dismember his father.
Which became
He proceeds.
a scythe is the symbol of like the Grim Reaper, right? Is that connected
Correct.
to this story?
Yes.
Do I get 10
exactly.
points?
20 points for Gryffindor.
20 points for Gryffindor. Thank you so much. I am so grateful. Thank you. This is an honor. Okay. That's actually very interesting. I did not know where the symbolism of the scythe came from. That's great.
Yep.
Good to know.
Absolutely. That is where it comes from. Strangely enough, Kronos repeats the same pattern of understanding that his child is going to rear up from beneath him and overtake him, which of course then happens with Zeus. Again, the mother, which is Rhea, Zeus's mother, got really mad because when Kronos found out that one of his children was going to overthrow him, he decided that he was going to eat all of his children.
Right.
So he proceeded to eat the Olympians, Hera, Demeter, Hestia, Poseidon, Hades. And when Rhea had Zeus, she gave Kronos a rock instead of the baby Zeus, sent Zeus to grow up on his own. Once Zeus was grown, she came to Zeus and said, "Hey, it's time for you to overthrow your father. He ate all of your siblings."
Cannibalism. Yeah. Trigger warning, cannibalism. Also, I think this is also patricide in theory because
Absolutely.
he's a father to them too. So it's double. It's double terrible. Yeah. Horrible.
So Zeus, with the help of his mother, Rhea, as well as Metis, which we already talked about her being his conscience, goes and dismembers his father and cuts open his stomach, and from his ripped open flesh, all of his siblings come forth unharmed, like they were just hanging out in his stomach. So
all right.
Obviously that's not reality, right? Like, again, this is a story.
These are all stories. Absolutely, these are stories. But yeah, it's a symbolic story if you think about it that way. Yes, he vomited out. I don't know if it would necessarily be vomit if it came straight from, if it doesn't come out, if it just gets ripped out. But yes, he
there are two stories. There's one that says a potus was created from, I want to say, like aniseed and mustard and poppies, and stuff like that, and it made him throw up. And one story says he threw him up. One story says that Zeus took that same scythe and cut his father open the way Kronos did. Again, oral traditions get skewed.
And I think it just depends on who's telling the story, right? Because maybe someone doesn't want to, trigger warning and say that they were ripped from his stomach and shredded and eviscerated, and some people say he just threw him up.
Totally.
So I guess it depends on how the story is sort of told. So let me ask you a question, because I feel like Greek mythology is super brutal. Is that the same kind of thing that you, and I'm not trying to generalize, obviously there's beautiful stories and sentimental stories, but like there's a lot of brutality. Do you see the same thing in Norse mythology as well? Do you see those same kind of themes running throughout?
Yes. Brutality, okay. Absolutely.
To that level as well with Norse mythology?
100%, yeah.
Ooh. Because I don't know like what I don't know like anything about Norse mythology that much. I know a couple of the gods and goddesses, but like I didn't know if their stories paralleled how vicious the Greek gods and goddesses could be as well.
I would have to say yes, they definitely do. Such as the stories. I mean, the first one that comes to mind is they imprisoned Loki, which is one of the gods, in a cavern underneath the earth. he is. So in Norse mythology, the Marvel studio took some of Norse mythology and kind of shook it up a little bit, and that's where you get Thor and all of those movies, right? All of those characters. Heimdall, Loki, Sif.
Huh.
So you see him a lot in like current.
Probably even more so than Greek mythology, I feel like.
Oh, big time. Yeah. Mainly because of Marvel. Because they decided that they wanted to go
that they want to go in that direction, which is interesting. Huh. Okay. So wait, what were you saying about Loki? Because I don't know. I have never even seen the Marvel movies, so like I don't even know if there's stuff in the Marvel movies referencing this Norse mythology, because I've never seen it. So you're talking to a blank canvas over here. I have no idea.
So at the end of the world, Ragnarok, they supposedly the world is supposed to end, but they had punished Loki before that, and have literally, supposedly, even now, because Ragnarok has not started, even now Loki would be sitting in a cavern beneath the earth, having a serpent spit dissolving chemicals, venom, in his eyes for all of eternity.
Oh, god damn. Oh my god.
Yeah, the brutality is definitely there.
Ow. Wait, that actually reminds me, wasn't there a story similar to that in Greek mythology where something got its eyes pecked out forever?
Yes. Yeah. There's several, actually. One, Prometheus gets his liver ripped out on a daily basis.
Oh, Jesus. Oh my
Sisyphus has to roll the rock up the hill.
Right. I remember Sisyphus.
Forever and ever, and have his eyes pecked out by vultures.
Right. I
for
remember
all
that
of
one,
eternity.
which is also, I mean, that's interesting that those two stories, the eyes are so similar. For all eternity, having your eyes pecked out or ripped out, or
Well, eyes were one of their biggest senses at that time.
oh, there's like a fly. Sorry.
You see a lot, you do a lot with your eyes.
Right. And the eyes are the windows to the soul, right?
Truly. Well, and there is the metaphoricalness of it, of you not being able to see, you not being able to, anything you need your eyes for, not being able to have that would be a true detriment.
Especially for, I guess, for the god, like a god as well. If you think about it in terms of like not being able to see as a god or a goddess would be very crippling, especially if you're talking about gods that go to war and have to fight their enemies. Like, it would make it,
I mean, it would make it impossible for Demeter to harvest the crops or grow the crops. It would make it impossible for Artemis to hunt.
Right. So,
the brutality we even see in Norse creation story, where Ymir, the first being who happens to be a non-gendered binary human, which is interesting to see. We also see it in Ymir, Ymir. Ymir.
Huh, Ymir. Okay. They are non-binary.
Yes, correct. Which is something that you see in Native American myths a lot of the time. You also see it in Egyptian stuff. But you see it, Native Americans really worship those who are two spirits or non-binary.
Interesting.
But Ymir, this first being, was ripped to pieces to create the world that we see today.
Was Ymir their grandparent god, if you will?
He was their... Yes, he was.
Okay. Like that, I'm trying to relate it to how we talk about Greek. Yeah, okay.
He actually was. Vili, Ve, and Odin destroyed Ymir, and from that they made the world that we know. When they killed him originally, the amount of blood that gushed out of his corpse was unimaginable. Blood as salty as the sea and as gray as the oceans gushed out, and suddenly, so deep and so powerfully, it caused a great flood. This flood we see in across almost all of the mythologies. Native American, Mayan, we see it in Gilgamesh's story from Mesopotamia. We see it in Christianity, the story of Noah's Ark. We also have scientific proof that there was a great flood at some time in our history.
And this sort of relates back to how, when we were talking previously, the gods and goddesses and all this mythology is a reflection of humanity at the time. And it was also a means to explain the unexplainable. At the time, they could not fathom what could have caused a flood, especially to that magnitude, other than a god or a goddess. So what were they saying caused this in the Norse mythology? What were they saying caused this flood?
The blood of Ymir. So the blood of this first being. So that's what actually
caused. That's what they attributed the actual flood to.
Correct. Right.
Wow. Interesting. Okay.
Because, and then the idea of this great sacrifice. Ymir had to die to create the world we see. We see this again, big time Christianity, where Jesus had to die so that you could be saved, or that your sins could be washed away. Ymir had to die so that we could have an earth. They talk about how they create literally everything. His blood became the seas, his skin became the soil. when you look up the sky, you're looking at the inside of Ymir's skull. And even the clouds that you see are his brains.
Oh, well, there you go. That's a new one. Okay, that's interesting. Wow. Okay.
So that's, yeah.
That imagery is
Again,
pretty astounding. But yeah.
It's
interesting.
It's interesting. I wonder where the original story came from. That's what I would. There's no way to know or find that out.
Of course, yeah, of course. I mean, yeah. And I like how we talked about before. You wrote in your outlines like a game of telephone. Like the stories have obviously changed and morphed over time. So that's what we're getting. So many years later, but it definitely, has been changed over time.
100%. The idea. Well, and here's like the perfect explanation. So the story of how the gods were created, had a fight. There were two different groups of gods that had a fight, and then whoever won that fight then got to be the quote unquote actual gods that are still referred to today. They got bored, usually in most stories, and decided to then create humans. So in Norse mythology, you see Vili, Ve, and Odin. Odin is the All-Father, the Zeus of Norse mythology.
Okay.
The king of the gods, if you will. They found these. They created all this land out of Ymir's body, and then searched and searched and searched for inhabitants and couldn't find anything. Well, they came to the edge of the world and saw these two sea-spun logs, sea-tossed logs. One of them was from an ash tree, and one of them was from an elm tree. From these two logs, they created the first man and woman.
Out of logs?
Odin.
Huh.
Yeah. Odin breathed life into them. Okay. Vili gave them will, intelligence, and drive, and they actually did the carving.
Interesting. That's the first time I've heard of the logs. I've heard of, with Adam and Eve and the rib, and even before that, it was like, I don't know. And then there was like mud, I've heard, but I've not heard logs.
The mud one is the one that I hear so far, and that's the Greek story, which if we have a second, I'll get into. But it blows my mind because when they named, in Norse mythology, when they named these two, they used the names Ask, A-S-K, because it's from the ash tree, and Imbla, E-L-M-B-L-A.
Wait, E-M, wait, give that to me again. E what?
E-M-B-L-A, Imbla.
Interesting, okay. It almost sounded like embalm. That's why I was like, it's a weird word to choose. Okay.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But it makes you think Ask and Imbla, Adam and Eve.
Yes. Wow.
They also refer to the middle world, or the this world that was created from Ymir's flesh, is the middle garden. It's called Midgard. So it's interesting to see this idea of this garden, this paradise being set up for these two original creatures, Adam and Eve. Oops, sorry, no. Ask and Imbla. So
very interesting.
Very parallel.
A lot of overlap. Yeah, a lot of overlap between all of these. Very, very interesting.
But you see the idea of breathing life was another one that I thought was highly interesting. The idea of the breath of life. In the creation story in the Greeks, you see this. You actually see Prometheus, who is a child of a Titan, who is the creator. He sculpts the humans from clay for Zeus, because again, Zeus got bored and wanted a special pet of his own. So he decided to create humans. And in doing this,
why did I think you were going to say he created dogs? You said And I was yeah, that's who I have to thank for my dogs. Okay.
Zeus and Prometheus have this conversation, and Prometheus says, okay, I guess I do get it. Artemis has her dogs. Athena has, her whatever animal she has. Aphrodite has her doves. You should have a special pet yourself. So humans were created.
Interesting.
Prometheus actually created all sorts of colors of humans, but in Zeus's excitement to come and see what they looked like, he stepped on the green, the blue, and the purple colored humans.
Damn it!
Leaving the colors that we still see today.
Come on! He smashed all the good colors. I want to be purple. Come on! Damn it! We could have been rainbow colors. That would have been amazing. More variety. Well, all right. Well, at least I appreciate the clumsiness as a fellow clumsy person. I appreciate that. That's interesting. I have not heard that either. Wow.
But yeah, one of my favorite. The title of that chapter is called "A Reduced Set."
A reduced set. Oh, that's funny. Oh, wow. So his set was incomplete, but why couldn't he build the purple blue again?
He could have. They went all over the world to find these specific perfect clay to create humans.
Interesting.
So it would have taken a lot longer, and Zeus just didn't have that kind of patience, even with Metis as his conscience. But Zeus asked. So the humans were created from Zeus's spittle, from the earth, the clay that Prometheus sculpted. Mm-hmm. They had to dry in the sun, and then last but not least at all, Athena came and breathed life into them, basically inspired them to live.
Oh.
And if you look at that, especially with my witch brain, I see all of the 4 elements being used to create humans.
Right.
Water, Zeus's magical spit, the sun, the fire, warming and creating the sculptures, the earth, the clay of the earth, being sculpted, and air, the breath of life.
Breath of life. Interesting. That is actually pretty fascinating. And I love that we're in this mythology, humans are created with spit. I don't know why, but that just makes me really happy. I like that little.
Was one of the weirdest, I don't know what in the world, but okay. It had to be this divine spittle.
The divine spittle. Keeping us together. So do you know any Indian myths, Native American myths, Mesoamerican stories? And also do they parallel to these sort of stories as well?
Well, the creation of life from clay is the one that I see more than any of the other ones across all of them. You see it, of course, in Genesis, and the Lord formed man out of dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. You see it in the Quran. God created man from clay. You see it in Sumerian mythology. Enki, or Enlil, depending on which version, created the servant of the gods, or humankind, out of clay from the Mesopotamian area. And even in Hindu mythology, the mother of Ganesh, Pavarti, made Ganesh from clay and turned the clay into flesh and blood. So that's that idea of humans coming from clay, being sculpted. You see it also in Egyptian mythology, which I didn't put on the list, but I thought about earlier today. There's a god of the Nile, Happy, and Happy scoops this magical clay full of silt and all of these, this great fertile clay, sculpts and creates humans from it.
And also, we were talking about it. The only differentiation from the clay or the mud was in Norse mythology, where we were talking about it was made from driftwood, which also will attribute to the land that we kind of were talking about, like the geographic places that these gods reside is going to attribute to what materials they have. In places like Iceland, they're not going to have clay.
Right. They're not going to have that as as a resource.
Right. So what do they have? They definitely got trees, and they definitely have driftwood and stuff like that. So that's how you'll see, depending on the location of what god or goddess you're talking about, how this creation story will change, which is really, really interesting. And I love the and there's a miracle in the Bible saying that Jesus healed a man's vision by mixing his spit with dirt and rubbing it in his eyes.
Yes, there is.
So I guess there's a spit dirt combo that seems very
divine
effective.
Spittle,
divine spittle and divine dirt, and I think that's really interesting. That and it sort of tethers all of us together in a way, because you have these stories from literally all over the planet.
Yes.
And let me ask you a question. So, like, the timeline of these stories, do they all sort of like? Because we all think about the origins of Greek mythology and Norse mythology as many, 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 many years ago.
Yeah.
But do they all correlate around the same time? Are these stories coming and then like they get changed and morphed, or are these all like independent stories that are constructed at the time where they live? Like, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's just so interesting how there's so many similarities, and it wasn't easy to get across the planet at that time.
No, this is not a time when people got to travel anywhere near the way we can travel today. If you were born in Norse land, whichever land it might be, Finland, Norway, somewhere up there, you didn't leave you might go to another village, or in war you might move around a little bit, but the movement of people at this time was not anywhere even close to what we have today, or even 100 years ago.
It was very dangerous to travel like that. Like, you could die, and it would take months on a boat if you were lucky. So that's why I'm just it's so interesting that these stories overlap so much.
To answer your question, I think, because that was the one thing I didn't look up and thought about earlier today, and I was like, crap, I don't actually know the date wise.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that yes, the timelines do seem to overlap. Of course, you go from like the Sumerian, Mesopotamian area, then to the Egyptian area, and you see the ideas travel to Egypt. From Egypt, you then see these ideas also travel to the Greek.
Right.
I don't want to say panhandle, but that kind of.
No, I know what you're talking about, that Mediterranean area. Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
And well, that's the other thing. You don't see a lot of transfer between Greek and Norse, but I feel like that's why it's so different in areas. But I also wonder, it makes me want to do more research and learn more about other cultures like Celtic mythology.
Yeah.
Because that would have been very close to Norse mythology.
Right.
Regionally.
Regionally, exactly. Interesting.
So
I wonder where the overlap would have been.
I wonder what, yeah, absolutely.
Very interesting. I think what we like, because we talked about mythology before, and then we are talking about mythology on a large scope here. And I think what's so interesting is, at the end of the day, it's like about storytelling and how all of these stories that have been around for centuries all correlate and how they are in a really painful sometimes way, a reflection of humanity and humanity's brutality at times, its beauty at times. And I think that's really what's so compelling about this topic. I know that this is shocking, but we have talked for an hour. We have so much more to talk about. Okay, so have no fear. If you like mythology, this has become a 3-part segment. We did the first episode with Drifter. This is the second episode with Bang Bang Beatrix. We are going to do the third and our only trio episode of Coven Conversations about mythology with both Drifter Dreams and Bang Bang Beatrix in August, where we are going to do a probably closer to a 2-hour segment, and we are going to talk about the nitty gritty of all of these different gods, goddesses, the correlation, the overlap, and also we can get more into the real deep, dark, sinister sections of it all. I just want to say, Beatrix, you are such a trooper. Thank you so much for doing this with us today. I am immensely appreciative. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I appreciate you guys for sticking around and listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it will go on our YouTube, which I have an official YouTube link for the channel, which our YouTube is, the link is officially PoopWitchX. Shout out for a customization. Yes. And so if you want to see part 3 of this segment, you'll have to stay tuned until August, but we have a ton of content coming between here and then. But thank you so much, Beatrix. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we wrap up?
I am going to put all of the books that I used to do my research, as well as some that I just adore, some pictures of them in Discord. So if anybody has any questions about anything or even comments, I'd be happy to have a conversation about anything we talked about, go into more detail about anything. I am an open book, also potentially the Poop Coven's unofficial librarian at the moment, but we're working on that unofficial part.
Unofficial part. Well, we were talking about maybe starting like a book club within the Poop Coven, because so many of us are readers, and Bang Bang Beatrix has a ferocious appetite for reading. So yes, unofficial but a sort of official librarian of the Poop Coven. But check out the Discord. She'll be posting the links. We do have more topics to discuss. So the 2-hour segment with the 3 of us will be in August. So thank you so much for everybody who came in. Thank you so much for everyone who asked questions and sat with us and listened to this incredible. You did such a fantastic, Beatrix, such a great job talking about this in a really umbrella way and helping us really start the process of digging even deeper into multiple mythology. So thank you so much for that. And today was episode 16 of Coven Conversations. I'm PoopWitchX, and thank you so much, Bang Bang Beatrix, for joining us. I appreciate the poop out of you. Thank you so much,
You are
babe.
so welcome.
Thank you. See you guys next time.
Bye.